Hello all, and welcome to Stingray Tom's Florida and another deeper dive into the archive. Today I'm taking a look at the Everglades, Florida's unique tropical wetlands, and I'm going to use images from National Geographic Magazine. Throughout the 20th century, National Geographic was one of the most popular magazines in the US, with a high point of 12 million subscribers in the 1980s. First published in 1888, it began including pictures in 1905, becoming one of the first photojournalism periodicals. Between 1930 and 94, it featured the Everglades in 14 articles. It's the photos, maps, and paintings in these articles that I'll be sharing today. I've divided the images into 5 categories: the natural areas of the Everglades and its surrounding wilderness, views of the Seminole Tribe, the area's remarkable wildlife, how the Everglades has been radically developed and exploited, and the ongoing work of conservation. The Everglades were originally called Pahokee, a Hitchiti language word meaning grass water. The name Everglades first appears in the early 1800s, with a glade being an open area within a forest. Both names are appropriate for Florida's river of grass. The reality is that the Everglades is only part of a major ecosystem that encompasses all of South Florida and much of the central part of the state. The Everglades watershed or drainage basin begins in Orlando. Boggy Creek, Shingle Creek, and Bonnet Creek are 3 of the waterways that come out of the chains of lakes and eventually lead to the start of the Kissimmee River. The Kissimmee runs 134 miles or 216 kilometers southward to Lake Okeechobee. By the way, Okeechobee is from the Hitchiti language as well and means big water. Sadly, there's no agreement on the meaning of Kissimmee. It's possible that it's from the Calusa tribe, but little is known of their language. As you likely know, Lake Okeechobee is a large flat basin that drains into the Everglades during the wet season. It's the second largest natural freshwater lake contained entirely within the lower 48 states after Lake Michigan. It's so large that when on a boat anywhere in the middle of the lake, you won't be able to see any shore at all. The area surrounding the lower half of the lake is historically considered part of the Everglades, but today much of it is continuously drained to allow for farming. Far to the south is Everglades National Park, but in between Lake Okeechobee and the National Park, there are many other federal and state protected lands, including Big Cypress National Preserve, Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge, the private Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, and the state's Holy Land Wildlife Management Area. While much of the area is protected, about half of it is either intensely farmed or as metropolitan areas. So here's the Everglades through the lens of National Geographic Magazine. 14 articles spanning 64 years. Enjoy.
I came to Florida and here was a new country. Nobody had written very much about it when I came down in 1915, and I really discovered the Everglades. So I discovered a piece of geography for myself. You think how lucky I was to have found it.
As Marjorie Stoneman Douglas said, how lucky I was to have found it. Lucky, not just for her, but for Florida and the rest of the world. She and hydrologist Gerald Parker, who is considered the father of Florida groundwater hydrology, realized that the Everglades isn't a swamp. It's a river that's 100 miles or 160 kilometers long and 60 miles or 97 kilometers wide and spans from Lake Okeechobee to Florida Bay with a total area of 7,800 square miles or 20,000 square kilometers. Roughly the size of Israel.
Of course, I was very fortunate because it was an absolutely new field. Nobody had ever written about the Everglades. Nobody knew anything about it. And I was the one who discovered, while working with Jerry Parker, that it was a river. I said to Jerry, "What's a river anyway?" "Why," he said, "a river is a body of fresh water moving in more in one direction than the other." And he'd already proved to me that the Everglades were not swamps, they were running water. And the water runs down from Lake Okeechobee, often as much as 4 miles an hour, you know. Well, and I went back to him and said, "You think I could get away with calling it River of Grass? Because wherever the fresh water was the sawgrass sprang up, and that's where the Everglades is this combination of sawgrass and water.
As you can see, South Florida is wetlands, mostly sawgrass marsh interspersed by sloughs, drainage canals that are the most river-like parts of the area. Opened in 1947, the same year that Douglas's book River of Grass was published, Everglades National Park sits at the southernmost part of the ecosystem. The sawgrass marsh is considered the true Everglades, and less than 50% of it still exists. The highly valuable soil, which is known as muck, is created by the flow of water through the Everglades. Muck contains a large proportion of organic matter and is some of the best soil for farming, but exposed to air, the organic matter will decompose. The Everglades ecosystem is made up of several more habitats as well. Ringing Florida's southern tip is the Western Hemisphere's largest mangrove ecosystem that serves as an immense nursery for crustaceans and fish and a rookery for birds. Nearby is the wet cypress savanna of the Big Cypress National Preserve. This tropical monsoon wetland is located to the north and west of the Sawgrass Marsh. The savanna is home to majestic bald cypress and dwarf pond cypress, which live in a wide range of soil types, wet, dry, or swampy, as well as both fresh and salt water. In other areas, there are stands of the South Florida slash pine, a local, not frost-resistant variety of slash pine common throughout the state. It prefers wetter soil, but not the standing water that cypress favor. At the time of the European discovery of Florida, the Everglades were little impacted by humans. The indigenous population that had called the peninsula home for 14,000 years lived on the coasts or along the rivers. The Everglades just aren't a place where human habitation is easy. The local Tequesta and Calusa people would canoe through the region, but they had no desire to live there. Once the U.S. took possession of Florida, settlement of the territory began in earnest. Living under the disinterested gaze of the Spanish, recently developed Seminole communities were made up of individuals that had fled before the wave of settlers in the English provinces of Georgia and Carolina in the previous century. However, as the now Americans began moving in, they wanted the Seminole out of the way. After 3 American wars fought against the Seminole, the longest, most expensive, and most deadly of all the Indian wars, Every Seminole was either dead, sent to Indian Territory, or pushed into one place in Florida where nobody wanted to live. When the fighting ended in 1858, Seminoles had melted into the Everglades. All told, this was just 200 to 500 individuals. In 1930, the government provided land for a reservation. In time, there'd be two separate but affiliated communities. As of 2023, there's about 4,000 people enrolled in the Seminole Tribe of Florida and 400 people enrolled in the Miccosukee Tribe. As Lewis Capron wrote in the December 1956 National Geographic, the Florida Seminole are a free people with whom the U.S. government has had no treaty since the undefeated tribesmen disappeared in the Everglades and Big Cypress Swamp more than 100 years ago. In a conversation with Seminole leader and medicine man Sam Tommy, Capron learned that Seminole did not mean runaway as is so often assumed. No, Tommy said emphatically, deer Seminole, panther Seminole. That means wild, Seminole, wild people. And yes, the name originates from the Spanish term cimarron, itself meaning wild. By the way, Sam Tommy was the brother of Tony Tommy, chief of the Florida Seminole Tribe in the 30s. The brothers and their mother Annie Tommy were believed to be the first Seminole family to move out of the Everglades and onto a Florida reservation. Now, the songs I'm playing in this section are excerpts from this album. They were recorded in the early 30s. While there's been a significant loss of habitat and a disastrous introduction of invasive animals and plants, the Everglades continue to be a place with remarkable biodiversity. It provides habitat for over 1,000 significant species, including 350 birds, 300 fresh and saltwater fish, 40 mammals, and 50 reptiles. It's the only place in the world where alligators and crocodiles live together. Meanwhile, the western part of the Everglades is home of the critically endangered Florida panther, the only place east of the Mississippi River where mountain lions can still be found. There's little question that South Florida has been destructively modified by development. This map shows 5 canals siphoning water out of Okeechobee to accommodate the rapidly growing communities of Florida's Gold Coast. At the time, there were less than 400,000 inhabitants there. Today, it's over 5 million, representing nearly 1 in every 4 Floridians. The northern Everglades became agricultural land for a variety of crops. The most important, sugarcane, produces 1.5 million tons of sugar annually. While cattle production is more important in the counties north of Lake Okeechobee, there's still about 170,000 cattle south of the lake. Another major product are tomatoes. Florida is the largest producer of fresh market tomatoes in the U.S., accounting for 50% of those produced domestically. Putting a highway through the Everglades would prove unavoidable. Named for the 2 endpoints of the road, Tampa and Miami, the construction of the Tamiami Trail cost $8 million, or nearly $150 million in 2023 dollars. The east-west segment that connected Naples and Miami was created by dredging a canal alongside and using the limestone to create the roadbed. Blasting the limestone required 1 million pounds or 445,000 kilograms of dynamite. Known as the Tamiami Canal, both it and the road act as a dam to block water flow. Like most national parks, the Everglades has visitor centers. The largest is at Flamingo, a site at the very bottom of the park on Florida Bay. While the park is located next door to one of the largest metro areas, it only ranks as the 24th most visited park out of 62. The park doesn't have the wow features that Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, or Redwood National Parks have, but when visitors take the time to understand this unique ecosystem, it can surprise, amaze, and inspire. Fire has always been a vital element of the Everglades dry season. For example, South Florida /pine need fire to be successful. Adaptations evolved that both encourage and resist fire. They're clad in bark that protects the trunk from heat, yet that same heat is needed to open pine cones to germinate seeds. Needles that cover the sandy ground feed fires that are hot but pass by quickly. Pines survived dozens of fires over their 100-plus year lifespans, but because of the area's development, huge fires now damage the Everglades. Some fires burn the soil itself. The muck contains so much organic matter, fire will destroy it. Fires used to pass through quickly, burning the sawgrass tops, but today it destroys soil, which takes decades to replace.
Herbie Allen publishing company was Reinhardt's, and Herbie was editor of the Rivers of America series. And he came down, he said, write a book about the Everglades. So there I was. So I started in at once working with the chief hydraulic engineer for the state, Jerry Parker, who was doing, same time, making the definitive studies of his great work, which is called The Groundwater of Southeastern Florida. Yes, I discovered it, and I've written about it, And while there are a good many people that know a lot about it, there are not many that know more about it than I do.
Active conservation of parts of the Everglades began as far back as 1916, when Royal Palm State Park was established southwest of Homestead. It was administered by the Florida Federation of Women's Clubs until 1947, when it became part of Everglades National Park. From that humble beginning, there's been an ongoing struggle between developers and conservationists ever since. When Everglades National Park opened, it was joined by state lands, Collier's Seminole State Park and J.W. Corbett Wildlife Management Area. But today there are many more. Note, however, that nearly all of Okeechobee's water enters the agricultural area or is channeled through canals. You can probably imagine how little still makes it into the Everglades.
I don't believe in compromise. You only compromise from weakness. If you're winning, you don't have to compromise.
Thank you for watching another of my videos. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to learn more about Florida's tourism history. Stingray Toms, Florida, traveling through time around the Sunshine State.